Okay, we're just about to start.
Yep, no worries. I'm just
I
sending
can
those
hear
out.
your.
Those
I don't
links.
know whether the audio is coming through in here, but I can hear.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's
can hear you.
I'm just sending. Yeah, I'm trying to type,
Oh
sending
right.
those links. To
All right. Well, you do that. I'll
everybody.
start talking on this next screen anyway.
Okay.
G'day everybody. Here we are, Changemakers, episode 5. Sort of a little bit of a reboot because I initially did this recording with Clint a little while ago when I was streaming out to Flicks for Good. And at that stage, I was running StreamYard, and it's maybe not StreamYard's fault, so I don't want to blame them completely. But we ended up with a really bad audio glitch, and it was so bad that I didn't even bother resharing it. The good thing for both myself and for you guys is that the conversation itself was great, and so I'm more than happy to actually do it again. So that's not a problem at all. So we're going to be talking with Clint Adams and talking about some pretty interesting stuff. So neuro-linguistic programming and how that can be used for healing and not for manipulation. The fact that I guess really, I suppose, digging into whether or not you're set in your ways. You know, there used to be a saying that a leopard never changes its spots or a cheetah never changes its spots, and I believe and hope, and we'll find out as we talk to Clint, that that is one of those sayings that's been passed down from generation to generation and has potentially caused a lot more harm than good. I certainly am a big believer in growth mindset and have had the good fortune of sitting in on some really fascinating talks with people talking about neuroplasticity and things like that. So I suppose if you're someone who struggles with some of your own behavior at times, maybe it's anger, maybe it's jealousy, maybe you have a violent streak and you think that's how I am. Maybe your parents were violent, so you're violent, you think that that's it. Maybe you've been in and out of jail or those things, or maybe you just suffer from depression or don't have a great healthy self image, and you also think that that's not something that's going to change. Well, this is a question mark that plagues many people, and it's a topic that I think it warrants digging into, particularly right now when so many people are in isolation around the world. So I'll grab Clint and we can start this conversation.
Hey there. How are you?
Good, mate. I just thought I'd give you that little bonus applause as a thank you for coming back.
Look, thanks for having me back. I know that it was a bit disappointing with the audio, but that's all good. We can. We kind of had a second. It's like a rerun, not a rerun. We get our trial run the first time, and this is the real gig.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Well, either that, or I suppose on the topic of rewiring, we get to redo what we've done
Yep.
before. So, mate, hey, look, if hopefully I got that introduction correct, but it would be great if you could also I give people a little bit of a rundown on who you are and what you're doing currently, and then we'll wind
Sure.
the clock back and talk about your background and what you've done that ultimately, I guess, has led through to what you're doing today.
Yeah, so what I'm doing today is probably more based around. So I wrote a book which has come out earlier this year. It's called "Lighting the Blue Flame," and it's based around suicide prevention and giving people, I guess, some initiatives and in helping how we can deal with bullying, how we can deal with things at a school level and at education level that I think is missing. I got a long history of working in HR, doing a lot of change management, working with adults more so. But obviously, I see these common themes and patterns coming through in terms of how they interact with people based on certain. I guess I call it an undercurrent. You mentioned something about people think it's a personality. To me, it's we build undercurrents up in our persona, our bodies, and all that kind of stuff. And what people don't realize is that a lot of stuff that may have happened a long time ago when we were young kids, we take in passively. Things are happening around us, and then we kind of become who we become, and we don't really. I wouldn't say we don't give a lot of thought to it, but we don't really think about how we've come to be the person that we are, how all those thoughts, how all those comments, how all those interactions with other people all along the way have kind of shaped us to be who we are. Some of it's passive and some of it's not negative at all. Some of it's, nasty things happen to people and it changes their path. I've worked with people in PTSD. So just to give a bit of my background,
Yeah.
I've worked, I've studied psychology. I did a science degree in psych when I left school. I then went into work for Victoria Police with the hope of kind of getting into the psych unit down the track. That was kind of my aim originally. But then that didn't happen. I won't bore you with details, but I went more in and studied more in rehabilitation counselling, like proper counselling, working one-on-one with people who've got some issues and stuff like that. So over the years, I went back to the police, worked with police who'd had PTSD or had injuries and they couldn't deal with it from a psychological perspective and all that kind of stuff. And then over the years, I've used that psych background, that counselling background to kind of change, help people more from a program perspective. And this is adults. This is also programs I did with police where we were looking at how we could help the police, not get overawed by certain situations where, they'd be maybe physically arresting somebody and the person's now not doing it, and then they still overstep the mark from a violence perspective. The Black Lives Matter incident probably gives a good example of that, where the guy was subdued, he wasn't violent anymore. Yes, there was all these issues, but what's happening in their heads as the police officer when you're fearful or something like that? And America's a very different beast to Australia with the amount of firearms and stuff. So
Yeah.
when people are feeling threatened, then things happen.
Yeah.
One of the themes that I have through the work environment, and I've seen a lot, and that's why I've written the book to kind of help with that earlier on, is seeing it. People who generally have a fight or flight undercurrent. So, when we talk about someone who's maybe very timid, very shy, won't kind of interact, there's an element of fear in there from their personality. Things may have happened and they don't want to interact with people, so they withdraw. That's their coping mechanism to not interact with people. And then on the flip side, you've got the people who, they've got a lot of anger because of what's happened and they can't deal with it. So they just get angry and then they act out in a number of different ways. Family violence, is just one way. People turn to alcoholism, drugs, all that kind of stuff. And so unfortunately, when I worked in healthcare a few years ago, I had a lot of access to information about a particular area that we covered. And I was just alarmed by how many young kids were on antidepressants, how many were, attempted suicide, how many on, all this kind of stuff. And you're thinking 12 and 13-year-olds, well, what are they really concerned about? So back then I started to think about, well, what kind of program can I help develop to help schools maybe with helping the kids kind of, we can't help that some kids maybe don't have a great upbringing and parents aren't very nice to them and they might have a bad childhood. Unfortunately, as a police officer, you'd see lots of those kinds of families and stuff. And so for me, it was about thinking, well, what can we do once the kid gets into primary school? At least, if they've had a bad couple of years or early years with the parents, hopefully there's some stuff we can do more proactively to kind of build their resilience, teach them more about how their brains, their bodies, and all that kind of work together with your unconscious mind, your conscious mind, your body, and then your emotions. They all kind of bundle up together, but how we kind of structure certain routines at school to enhance some of those things. So that's kind of how the book kind of began. I did it as a school program initially. I tried to talk to politicians back then. This is in Victoria when I still lived down there. But unfortunately, sometimes politicians aren't subject matter experts and it's not their thing to know about. So, that they, no disrespect to any of them, but, they have their own agendas. They go, I want to find something that's going to get votes. So, sometimes the funding doesn't get to the people that probably, could really do some real good. And so sometimes they choose things that, might be someone they know or someone that they know who also knows someone else. So, sometimes those funding don't go where they should. So, look, mine never went anywhere. And so I changed my tact and decided to write a story and kind of use the book and the story to just get the message out there. For me, it was about saying, well, it's kind of challenging the education department. I think there's some things that the education is a long way behind in from a mental health perspective. Like if you think about physical health, for example, we all know about nutrition. Even when I was at high school, and I'm showing my age, I was in the 80s and 90s. So,
Yeah.
but not even the 90s. I was already at uni in the 90s. But we got taught about nutrition. You got taught about sport. You got taught about your physical health, carbs, protein,
Yes.
all that stuff. Very little about how your brain actually operates. Once you get into kind of late high school, you might choose psychology as an elective, but it's never really been considered as just general part of every week curriculum kind of activities. And there's lots of things we can do that actually can help with that. So like if we use the physical analogy, like okay, about you got to cut your you got to get your cardio up, or you got to do weight training, or you got to cut out this, and that'll give you a healthier perspective. Well, mental health is the same. There's things that we can do, but understanding why we do it is the key, where people can actually
Right.
look at what other things you can do for activities. Like, a good example is, why would bringing dogs into a prison help the prisoners actually feel better about stuff? Well, their serotonin levels go up, the oxytocin levels go up, and they're all good kind of natural drugs in your own body.
Yeah.
So there's just one example, right? There's lots of things that can give you the same feeling, like, going bushwalking. Why does that make you feel good?
Right.
Well, again, the surroundings, what you're taking in, better air, all that kind of stuff adds to your mental state. Mindfulness
Yes.
is another one. What mindfulness does is really stop, slowing down your brain waves. And so when you're in that heightened state, your brain waves are actually quite high. So you're in a beta state. So all these things, and understanding all these things, can kind of make you think about, well, what's the best program for me? I'm not necessarily a runner, so I don't want to get endorphins, but I can do this. And there's all these things. So for me, it's about, you know, people understanding more about those things, and then kind of, working on different ways to get things to work for them. And I just don't think there's kind of enough of that information getting out there. There's a lot of information out there,
Yep.
but actually getting it and making it practical for people is the key part of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the way that you outline things. I can see how, um, like just putting it, using those analogies around exercise and things like that. I could see how that would work really well in that kind of prison setting, or and particularly like, I mean, obviously all of these mental health and potential fallout sort of situations apply to both men and women, and kids and adults, but it's safe to say that guys have stereotypically not been the best at talking about their feelings, and they are also often more focused when it comes to strength training and things like that. So to be
Yeah,
able to talk to someone about, hey, your brain is a muscle too, and you can actually rewire and change pathways within your mind so that you don't have to be going down the same patterns all the time,
absolutely.
is really awesome. Now, here's something that we didn't touch on last time, but it's something that I'm interested in, because when I first heard about neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP as it's sometimes shortened to, I had only come across it from a sales perspective, and even watched a few things like with these kind of master manipulators who kind of could get people. I can't, you probably know the name of the guy. I can't think of. There's some guy, I think he's an English guy, and he can kind of go, oh, just can you help me with this map for a second? And he gets people doing these ridiculous things,
Yeah,
like they just, it's like that thing where there's the people dancing or something, and then the gorilla wanders through the shot and you don't see it,
yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah, it was kind of fascinating. But I, to be honest, almost kind of thought of it as maybe like mind control, or like people using it for ill intent, hence, which is why I chose the title of neuro-linguistic programming for healing and not for manipulation. Have you found that there is, if you do actually talk about it, that sometimes people have that misinterpretation? And what's the crossover between the two?
Look, I think, again, it's another tool that focuses on certain ways our brain works. So when we associate something, they call it anchoring. So if we have a bad experience, for example, and we associate something else with that at the time, you can quickly create shortcuts for how you feel about that situation, and those things will come flooding back. And so you kind of build a loop of how your thinking works around that. It's no different to any other patterns that we have. When you think of, like, if I focus on someone in a PTSD perspective, they had a bad experience, and that bad experience, like, let's say, I'll use a real example of a police officer who had a gun pointed at his head, and so I was dealing with him. So clearly a bad event. Now that event was over. He didn't get killed or anything, but he didn't actually get physically injured. But he was a different guy from that moment.
Traumatized.
So that that physical real event is now a psychological event in his head, right? So his brain has anchored that event, and he's now starting to focus only on that. It's like he couldn't focus on anything else. He would start to think about things that could have happened to him, how his kids wouldn't have a father. He also then started to, and then it would actually take him down another path where he was starting to question himself as a bloke. He used to be a physically strong police officer, comfortable in his own skin, never had a bad upbringing or anything like that. And now he's had this event, and it's just changed the course of his life. Then he starts to experience shame for having felt like this, like you said, the blokes, I'm the bravado guy, and I'm the toughie, and I've been the cop, and I've arrested blokes and taken them down and all this stuff, and now I'm a sobbing, crying mess, and I don't know what to do. So the anchoring piece sticks with you. And so when these guys, you talk about the manipulation, look, some people are more susceptible to it. Like you have to kind of I don't think they can kind of do it to every person. They probably target certain people. It's like when they do hypnotist guys who get people, clucking like a chicken on the stage and stuff. People can be brought into that state, and there's definitely some people who are brilliant at it. I certainly don't use it that much in terms of manipulating people. But to your point,
you're not going to have me doing a lizard dance later on or something, like in the middle of the show.
No, on TikTok. Yeah, that's right. Kylie Minogue locomotion or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, essentially, there's a lot of tools that can help break patterns, and this is one of those. NLP can be used to break patterns of behavior and put better ones in there. So what it's ultimately designed, if you look back, it's about getting people, and it's a lot to do with the language that you use. And so one of the things I do a lot is about having people have a conversation in their heads, but a deliberate one. So when I'm dealing with people with PTSD, for example, it's about going, okay, here's the event. So this particular police officer I did this with was, so there's a couple of different techniques. One, you want to try and break that pattern first. So when he's having the thought, which is a memory now, it's not the real thing, his neurons fire together. And every time they fire together, what fires together wires together. And that creates a shortcut in terms of how he thinks and how automatic it becomes for him. Right. So part of what you want to do there is, because it's taking him to what I call a red brain space, which is the amygdala fight or flight kind of feeling. So he's feeling sad, he's feeling angry, he's feeling all these emotions, and they're all coming out of the amygdala, which is our emotional center, really. Emotions aren't bad, but if you get stuck there, it can be obviously a problem. So with him, it was about a few little techniques to kind of change his whole wiring and firing together. So let's just say there's 100 neurons. I know there's way more, but just for illustration purposes, 100 neurons wire and fire together as he thinks about this event, and it makes him feel a certain way, sad, angry, all that. So for me to want to change that, I've got to change the wiring and firing in some way. I either got to replace it with something else, or I've got to at least have him break this pattern, preferably both. So what I do as part of my technique in talking to him is just get him to do a thoughts diary and say, every time that event pops in your head, I just want you to write it down. So the reason I do that is he's got to do analysis work to actually at least think about his thoughts. So when you do analysis work, when you're in red brain and you go into an amygdala state, that fight or flight, the natural thing is the blood's actually draining from your brain into your body, and that's getting you ready for fight or flight, going into the body, getting your muscles ready, all that kind of stuff. By doing analysis work, you've got to use the prefrontal cortex, which is a big part of our brain, and it actually forces you to have to pump blood back up there because it's got to be oxygenated to kind of do that problem solving and thinking and analysis work. So you're slowly breaking the whole physical part to him going into red brain and the body's responses to that. And at the same time, you're making him think about something else. So let's say that 100 was happening before that we did this, but now that he starts doing the analysis work and he starts writing it in a little diary, and it's forcing that, it might be only 80 neurons wiring and firing together. He starts down the process, but now he's interrupted it, hasn't gone all the way like it was before, and it's slowly changing, and now he's thinking about something else. Whereas normally he would think about it, all 100 would go together, and he'd keep going down the path that he was and have that recurring kind of process. And then he beats himself up because he's not feeling great. He's hating how angry he is. He's hating how sad he is. He's crying and all that stuff. So this is about slowly interrupting it. And what you could see when you look at the diary, I used to get him to do it for like a week, you see actually less and less of that actually go in the diary. And then the next part is to say, okay, we're going to go to another level, still do the diary, but now I want you to do all your thoughts, and I want you to actually put whether it's positive, negative, what you were thinking at the time. So again, it's additional analysis work, but it also adds another activity, if you like, for him to do. Then on top of that, we kind of get into a situation where we start to say, okay, let's play around with this whole memory of what you've got. So we're trying to change what his anchoring to that event was and go, pretend you're a director in a movie. This is your movie. This is your brain. This is you bringing the memory into your own head now, and this is what we can do with it, right? So we play around with it a bit in his head. So, okay, the guy's there with a gun pointed at you. Let's pretend he's got a big red nose and butterfly wings or whatever, make it silly almost. Because what you're trying to say to your brain is, we don't have to associate all these possibilities with it. The possibilities are endless. It can be good and bad. Like you mentioned about, neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
When people get sad and over time, they've developed that. But you can develop it the other way, in a positive way. So this is where one of the key parts that I explained to him is we've got an unconscious brain and a conscious brain. And when the unconscious takes you somewhere, you're not choosing it. Or sorry, you can choose it, but you're actually allowing it just to take you somewhere. Dr. Joe Dispenza in his book, You Are the Placebo, describes it as being on a wild horse. So, it can take you great places, but if you don't rein it and tell it where you want it to go, it can take you anywhere. And it's a bit like that. And so having some control and actually acknowledging that, no, I can control this beast. I just have to do certain things and do it in a deliberate way. Like when they do break in a horse, there's things that they do, because otherwise the horse just runs crazy. They don't automatically walk up as a wild horse and just let you put the bridle on and let things happen. So exactly. So, from that perspective, it's about us actually understanding how we can take control. What happens is we feel things. Like when we have cortisol levels increasing, which is our stress hormone, it builds up. It actually makes us take notice and thinks there's more danger. So we look for danger. Now we live in a more modern society, so there's less actual things out there trying to eat us and kill us and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's still things obviously that are dangerous, but certainly we don't have the same issues that the caveman had and all that kind of stuff. But we still have a kind of caveman brain, and we constantly scan for stuff. But this is why, like, even social media and social issues now become a threat to us, or at least a perceived threat, where, we got people saying things on Facebook. Why should I give a rat's about someone saying anything nasty about me on Facebook? But our brains are designed to look for threats. So when someone, shames you on Facebook and says, oh, Clint's wearing a crappy polo top or whatever, and I'm a kid or a young person who's very impressionable, I take that to heart. Oh, this is a social threat to me. People are going to laugh at me. People are going to make me feel bad. I'm feeling bad already. And then, then things go down a really, really bad path. But again, understanding how that brain works and how those cortisol levels, like if you go, oh, what's supposed to happen in the wild? All animals have cortisol. So it's designed to go, something's not right. What am I looking for? So we look for stuff. but we'll find stuff. That's the problem if we kind of just let it do it for us, because
Yeah.
it'll find something. I don't feel right, so I'm going to look for something, and then we will find stuff that bother us long term, and then we can kind of build it into bigger things. We've got great imaginations, right? So,
Yeah.
so someone who's, for example, who's highly anxious, over time they've developed that undercurrent of worrying.
Yep.
I'm fearful about stuff all the time. So their cortisol levels tells them something. Now they're looking for it. So,
Mm.
you know, my mother-in-law is a good example of this, where many years ago, she's a lot better now, but many years ago, my wife was late for work. This is before mobile phones time.
Yeah.
And not late for work, late coming home, and there was an accident on the road. Her natural instinct was to automatically go, it's Cindy. It is. It has to be.
Right.
She's ringing the cops, want to know what kind of car it was involved in the accident. And we're
Yeah.
like, everyone else is getting angry with her because she was fully like highly anxious about this, and went worst case scenario straight away. Like, there's thousands of white cars out there, obviously, and it didn't end up being my wife, but just to illustrate the point,
Mm.
she just massive threat, worried about it until she came home, could not be calmed down. Like,
Couldn't
this
get
is
out of it.
early 20s, and lots of people develop these things because of things that have happened to them, and they don't understand how you don't have to be there. You can change how you perceive all events. You can change a lot of things, and so being deliberate and using our actual conscious brain is so
Mm.
important. That when I
Mm.
read stuff on, autobiographies, and I call them positive deviants, there's lots of people that
Mm.
have had crap happen to them over the years, right?
Yes.
And they've
Yeah.
come out the other end super resilient.
Yeah.
Mandela,
Yep.
fantastic, right? The guy's been
Yeah.
put in prison for fairly, uh, bad reasons, but anyway, 27 or whatever years he spent in Robben Island, and his first thing when he came out was that he said, I can't leave. I have to leave the anger there. I'm not going to be able to come out and live my life if I'm worried about what happened back there, how I was treated, because that's not going to help me. I need to move on. I need to build it. So that he made a choice, and that's that conscious brain choice to do something else and change what he thought about the events, how he was going to do things, and he obviously became an inspiration for a nation,
Yeah.
and a lot of people speak very fondly of a guy who was in prison for 27 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, I think maybe I mentioned this last time we spoke. I don't know. I have so many conversations
So
with
good.
people, but fortunately, and I'm really grateful now, and unfortunately, as is the way often in life, your gratitude sometimes comes far down the line. And
Yeah.
in this circumstance, my grandpa has passed away, many years now, or quite a few. But one of the things that he did when I was growing up that I really found kind of frustrating at the time, to be completely honest, was he would always share these different books with me. He was right into, like Zig Ziglar, Think and Grow Rich, and Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, and all
Yeah.
these sorts of books, the classics, Dale Carnegie, and How to Win Friends and Influence People, and all these different things, right? And just the power of positive thinking. And it must have come through because I do remember. I think I've got it somewhere here. It's one of those like classic, there's the red hardcover sort of sewn together
Okay.
book binding, the Norman
Yeah.
Vincent Peale Power of Positive Thinking book. But I remember reading that, and it was kind of a bit of a light bulb moment because he talked about how it's a bit like that kind of jump off the bridge when you get to it thing. But he used an analogy of basically that you can picture the journey that you're going to go on, and you can picture these walls that you might come across, and these sometimes you create these massive walls in your mind, these things that maybe you think are even insurmountable, and you're not going to be able to get over them or past them. But as you would know, I guess this is the benefit of one of the one of the only benefits of aging is that more often than not, these bad things that you potentially imagine don't actually happen, And so the whole philosophy, or a large chunk of that book, is really about you're wasting a lot of your mental and emotional energy thinking about stuff that might go wrong when that's not probably even going to be the case. So don't worry about that, when, deal with it if and when you get to it. So I think it's Yeah, it's really interesting. So talk to me about envy, because this is a funny one. Like when I was 17, 18, 19, the first couple of serious relationships that I had, and they were like, at that age bracket you would classify serious, like 2 to 3 years type sort of thing. Um, I was a really jealous person, like and I hated it. I hated it within myself, like, and it was like they talk about the green rage or whatever, because I would
Yep.
be at a club or something like that, and everyone would be sitting there, our friendship circle, and I had this one particular girlfriend at the time who, like. Well, I thought she was I thought she was amazingly hot, right? And
Yep.
I had no idea how I'd actually managed to end up being with her. And that was probably playing. I now look at it rationally and go, well, the insecurity was probably a big part of it, to think that she was really outside my league and that it would never last. And
Batting above your average, as they say.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And but she was also like just a naturally friendly person, and so she would probably be quite innocently like maybe go sit on like the lap of some guy, one of our friends, and I would just be sitting there just. Yeah, I would get into
Easy.
a state where like I just couldn't, like, I couldn't really socialize. And the reason it's popped into my head, well, one, it seems to be relevant to what you talk about in terms of the loops or the cycle that you can get stuck in, and the
Yep.
the, the different sort of chemicals going on in your mind. But the other thing was, I'll be honest, okay, everybody, I do have a secret. One of my secret shames is that I do love The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, and so and so more often than not, it's me saying, let's what's happening with The Bachelor. So anyway, we were watching that last night, and one of the guys on there, just you could see he was just going to this zone, and you could think this is gonna, like, if he doesn't snap out of this space that he's in at the moment, where he's basically just thinking about what every other guy's doing, and it's all turned into this massive competition, and
Yep.
he's going to shoot himself in the foot, because girls don't like that. Nobody's going to want
Yeah.
to see that. So tell me, and in fact, I recognize that within myself and hated it so much, because sometimes it literally just would take over. I'd just be in this rage. We'd end up having this massive fight, and I would storm off, or she would storm off, or we both storm off, and it just would end in disaster inevitably, right? And uh, I deliberately stayed single for a couple of years because I was actually kind of scared of that. Like I knew the next time I was with someone, I didn't want. That was one thing I absolutely did not want. And thankfully, and I thank God as well, because I prayed about it, But like I don't suffer from that drama now. So tell us about that, and if there are any guys or girls out there who I guess struggle with that, and probably it is something that happens more in your younger years. But how can people? What are some techniques maybe that people could use to try and get out of that little funk?
Yeah, look, whenever I do an assessment, if you like let's say you and I were talking and you were experiencing this now. Obviously, this was a while ago for you, but you kind of want to see if there's a backstory that's created some of that for you. So I don't know if you had a relationship that did go bad, or you got cheated on by someone else, and then the trust becomes an issue. We're naturally trusting, right? Like, you think about it, you wouldn't put your kid on a school bus if you didn't trust 99% of the community, all that kind of stuff. So as human beings, we've developed this ability to trust people, and so our intimate relationships all built around trust and all that kind of stuff. But you know, things can happen. So sometimes it can be even just the relationship of your parents splitting up, and then mum talking badly about the partner, or dad talking bad about the partner, depending on who it is, and that kind of stuff. And so these little things, they influence us, right? So we have all these influences. And again, when we're young and we hear these things, and like I said, I don't know your background and that the intimate side of what you're talking about, but
Yeah,
ultimately, when I'm asking questions and I'm wanting to know that in a counseling kind of environment, they're the type of questions I would kind of ask, because it's these little things that slowly drip feed into us, especially when we're very young. We don't realize we're taking it in, we're hearing things, and it creates that undercurrent again. And if you have an undercurrent of fear, it's either fight or flight that comes out. With you, you were starting to get angry and seething, and that something was triggering your amygdala, so your blood was boiling. It was in here. And so from a physical perspective, in that moment, that's what was, so something's triggered that. The fact that she's friendly with people, the fact that maybe you didn't trust women, I don't know, in general, or just her, or you didn't trust your mates because they were, sleazy blokes, I don't know. But, there's a combination.
There's probably an element of that.
There's, so, and that's kind of where, the best advice is about understanding how your anger can come out and how your fear can come out. Again, fear and anger, fear and anger. And that's that common theme I keep seeing through adults that come to the workplace where, if they're very fearful people, they just do the bare minimum, keep their head down, don't want to engage, don't engage with management because management are bastards. And then they have this undercurrent of, of fear. And so they won't have conversations when people treat them badly. They'll put up with crap. This is the timid side of one. But then you've got the angry ones who will just, they'll blow up and have arguments with people and crack the sads. And then that affects their relationships because people don't want to hang around with a person who's totally hot-headed and you can't have a conversation. And then throw alcohol in, you're at the club. The first thing that it affects is that frontal cortex, the part that I was saying where you can do your conscious thinking. So you don't think like a normal person when you're drunk and you're angry. I've seen so many people as a cop who end up in jail because they've been on the terps and they got angry and now there's a problem. And then, so there's a lot of those kind of factors that come in. For me, it's about understanding a bit more about what are my trigger points. So for you back then, if I was talking to you as a young person who was having these issues, you'd be saying, okay, we talk about the classic count to 10 stuff. The reason that can help or take deep breaths is oxygen into the brain. It also breaks the pattern. So if you were getting angry and going, rah, here's my response, and you can at least interrupt that just that little bit again, the same as the stuff I was talking about with the PTSD, you're interrupting a process that would normally take you down that anger point. So you might go, okay, let's talk about this. Or, what happens is you don't handle it well when you're angry. You handle it worse. So if you can calm it down, and even if you just sit there, hey, you know what, can we have a quick chat? I'm starting to get a little bit, I don't know if you ever did this with her or how it ended or what the end was, but, being able to be calm in a situation is the key to it. When I was running stuff with the police, that what we call de-escalation points where you're angry with this bloke, he's put you on the runaround, now you've arrested him, you've cuffed him, and, we've seen it time and time again when they throw another cheap shot in there. Just to, it was recently Victoria police guys stomped on the guy's head. He was already cuffed on his belly, stands on his head. Like, why would you do this? Again, anger and rage. Why do the Black Lives Matter people go and loot bloody? I get the whole thing about the protest, but I'm very hard to get why people are then going and stealing stuff from other people because they're angry. That's where it comes from. Anger leads to a lot of things. And if you feel like you've been shamed or you feel like you've been discriminated against, there's lots of anger that just stay there. And that's the problem. It's that we don't kind of work on the anger and say, you know what, I can let some of this go because I'm holding it in. I'm getting angry. Mandela didn't want to hold that in because he knew if he came out and said, oh, you screwed me over for 27 years, I need to, take my pound of flesh on people that made decisions 27 years ago. Well, you can't actually win that because it's like, it's a faceless kind of enemy. It's a bit like, I'm a dark South African. Obviously, I was South African born and, a very racist country. And there's certainly elements of racism here in Australia. But, some people need to kind of go, how much do I want the past to hold me back? And how much do I want to be about, let's just try and do things better and talk about this and come up with solutions and ways of dealing with racism moving forward rather than stuff that happened 300-400 years ago that we've got no control over. No one's alive from that time. Yes, there's been things that have maybe come along and some cultural thought processes come along, but, we're in a very different environment back then. And so to me, it's about having the good conversations, talking about the way forward. And again, it's a blue brain response. So when I'm looking at solutions, it has to be blue brain. If it takes me to an angry spot, I'm not going to go very well. And it's always the same pattern. Even
Yeah.
what you were saying about you getting jealous and getting angry probably led to you guys breaking up in the end. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Oh, I'm sure it didn't help. It's one of, and it's one of those things for what it's, for what it's worth for any guys. Oh, it's getting a little bit of feedback here for some reason. Yeah. Oh, that's
Okay.
a bit better. Maybe it's coming through your speakers. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Have you don't have headphones on now, do you?
No.
No. I think it's maybe right if I'm not speaking directly into the microphone.
Okay.
Or if you could chuck the headphones on, might help. While you're doing that, I'll just keep talking here.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Try to avoid that little gremlin. Yeah, if there are any guys watching this, if there's one other thought or food for thought, and you do get jealous, and then you go and say the wrong thing to your girlfriend or your partner or whatever. One, nobody likes being told what to do. Nobody likes being micromanaged at work. People don't like being micromanaged, and I certainly, I'm probably one of the worst. Like, I hate being told what to do. I really do. I'll be honest. And and particularly girls, like if you're younger, you start treating them like a possession, and you're saying accusing them of being slutty or other things, and what are you doing, tarting yourself all over everybody or something ridiculous. Just think, even just articulating it in the light of the day. How would you respond? How does that feel for that other person on the other side of the fence? So more often than not, some people are going to just rub it in your nose and go, right, that's it. I'm going to make it even worse for you. So you could really dig yourself a big hole. That's all I'm going to say on that one.
Yeah, 100%. Does that sound better for you?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. One of the models I use is something called the dialogue model. And the dialogue model, like at the moment, we're talking. It's dialogue. You're talking, I'm talking. I don't think we feel unsafe with each other. And usually when people feel safe, psychologically safe, we can talk about anything. So as part of the dialogue model, it talks about the conversation we're having, but then there's also a part in the dialogue model that talks about the conversation I'm having in my head while we're having this conversation, and you're having one in your head as you have the conversation. And in your head, again, red brain, blue brain comes into it, where if I pick up anything or you pick up anything that makes me feel fearful or angry, like I feel I'm threatened, I'll have a response in a red brain space. So that's the reality of it. So if you said, hey, why are you dressing like that? This person goes, I see and hear what he's saying. I feel a certain way, and now I act. So my action is, if I'm angry at you for having a crack at me, who are you calling slutty? What do you think that? And you go, oh, now she's having a go. She just wants to be argumentative. And that's what you're having in your head, right? So now you've got two people who aren't happy and not feeling safe about the conversation because you're judging me, and you are judging. So you're kind of angry anyway because there's the behavior that you saw that made you get angry in the first instance. You're already in red brain. You've now said something to her that puts her in red brain. And now you're both having a conversation in red brain. So you both, silence or violence is going to come out of it, right? You're going to have an argument, or you're going to go, oh, bugger this, I'm not talking to anyone. You go, silence or violence.
Silence or violence.
That's how it works. And so, in a work environment, the same thing about, we can only really get to proper solutions. And this is what I was even saying about the, things that happened many years ago. If I'm in anger, there's things that anger's not a bad thing. Anger makes you go, that is not right. We need to fix it. No problem. That just sends you that message. But essentially, if you stay there and you're just angry all the time about everything in the world, I'm a dark person and the world owes me this stuff and, blah, 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 blah. But I'm, as an individual, that angry all the time, and I look for other people who are just as angry like me. You have issues. This stuff builds and builds and builds, and then lots of people get angry about things. So from a solution perspective, it's about being in a blue brain space when we're trying to come up with stuff. If I want to, if I get angry too, trust me, I'm a road rage driver, I reckon, and I do have to calm myself down. We all get it. It happens. It's our bodies are designed this way. We all have the same emotions, except for some people that maybe have some different actual mental problems. But in terms of damage and stuff like that. But essentially, most human beings all experience the same emotions for a reason, and it's designed to give us just cues that, like I said, when you're stressed or when the cortisol levels come up, it's designed there for you to look for threats. In the savannah, something's not right. What's going on? I feel it. I can feel it in my belly, and we get this feeling because our bodies actually are our decision makers. It's not actually our brains. We can use our brains to make decisions, but a lot of times when you're in that moment, the body takes over. You don't even, you go, something's not right. You meet someone for the first time and you just have that feeling. You look at them and it's that unconsciousness that's picking it up and going, oh, something creepy about this bloke. And because the unconscious is non-verbal, it sends you messages through your body, and that's part of how those chemicals work, and then are designed to give us info in a non-verbal way. So understanding that that's what it does, and then understanding yourself. It's like I do feedback sessions for people at work where you might have two people who go, oh, I want this person to stop treating me like this. You go, have you spoken to them? Oh, no, I couldn't do that, or I'm in HR, they come to me and say, oh, Clint, I want to tell you this story. This guy did this, this, and this, but I don't want you to do anything about it. I go, well, what's the point of telling me? I just want him to stop. So having conversations isn't always easy for people because there's that fear factor of, are they going to hate me? Are they going to treat me worse next time? And again, all those threats, people play around in their head. So if there's any perceived threat in it, they won't have the conversation. They go to silence on the outside of the conversation. And lots of problems stay that way because we don't deal with it well, because we're worried we're going to go into red brain and we're worried they're going to go into red brain, which is what happens a lot of times. We have two people arguing with each other. But when you actually understand a bit more about your emotions, you understand why you're getting angry, we talk about why you're getting angry, actually creating the safety to have a conversation. This is one of the biggest issues with mental health and suicide prevention from my perspective is, we have Are You OK Day, right? That happens X amount of times and similar kind of awareness things. But the biggest issue is, why don't more people talk about their mental health? Because, again, those little, comments that people make, those little things that people have been told, suck it up, princess, when you're 5 years old and you're struggling a bit, and men need to be tough, or you're just being a sook, or or someone is struggling with mental health, and then they hear about some other poor bugger who's been spoken derogatorily about it. Oh, look at the nutter, or and there's these little comments that stick in your head that again create a bit of a fear factor for you. So you go, I don't want to be called a loony or be called one of those derogatory terms. So you don't say anything. People used to come to me because I run mental health stuff at a lot of the workplaces that I've been, health and wellbeing programs, and talking through exactly what I'm talking about here. Lots of people have confided in me and spoken to me. And when I have team sessions that I run with it, I try to encourage some of the ones that have done that to talk in front of the other people in the group, because when it creates a bit more courage for people to say it. It's a bit like, the bloody Harvey Weinstein stuff, right? Once one woman came out and said something, all these other women came out. Now, you go, well, they were obviously all scared for various reasons, going to affect their careers, da-da-da, he's a very powerful man, all this kind of stuff. But it's no different with, we've got to kind of create that environment where people can be okay to go first. And then what it does is it shows the other people, you can go. It's okay. We can talk about it. The more we actually bring people, not just saying, are you okay? We should be talking about people that have had these experiences, that have been these positive deviants. I was in a bad place and this is what I did and I had to change my focus. And then guys like me can help with, well, do you understand why that helped? Because they did this, this, and this, and this was happening in their brain. So they're trying to change, reversing the gears and get the blood going back up there and using their... So all the techniques are there, but actually hearing people talk about it and actually doing this as a proactive thing for school kids when they're really, really young before. Because for me, a lot of this stuff is change management model stuff. You're trying to change what they've been doing for 40 years as an adult. But ultimately, if you've got a 5-year-old coming into school and they're getting treated badly by another 5-year-old, you pull their hair or something fairly low-key, not totally bad, but still not nice. Creating an environment of safety and getting everybody talking deliberately about things is calibrating the behavior. It's also showing the other kids you can go first. They've spoken about it, so you can go as well. And it's creating that safety to do that. And again, that calibration of what's good behavior and bad behavior becomes important, because then the group actually has more say. Because if you have a bully, most places that have maybe one bully, right? And there's lots of people affected by the one person, and they don't say anything because of that fear factor. They all see it, they all hate it, but they don't say anything because they go, well, it's not picking on me, so I'll just not be involved. I'm the bystander effect kind of stuff, where, and again, the psychology that goes into those things with groups is a big part of it. Like, we can actually use the group so much more, in a lot of ways. Like, that's one of the things I don't like about counselling, is it's generally one-on-one. So you only get to touch that one person. Hopefully you make a change and then it all works. But we can do a lot more proactive things that affects groups and involves the groups to deal with stuff better, and help with the courage of it. When there's strength in numbers, like I said, that Harvey Weinstein stuff, those women all band together. They were a group, class action. They became friends, some of them, through the process.
Yeah.
Because it's support, and I think we can build more deliberate support at school level to help kids who obviously become these adults, like you and I. We're adults now, and like you said, we learn things along the way. There's no reason we can't accelerate some of that learning into the kids when they're younger. We don't have to talk about neuropeptides and all that stuff with them, but it's routines and stuff like that where we can kind of steer how resilient they become and how much information they get as they learn about their bodies, about their brains, about their mental state, about that unconscious brain, conscious brain, and how we can use all that stuff. To me, like I said, about the physical health, why can't we be doing this more? Why aren't we doing this more?
Yeah, 100%. And I just, I don't think it was last week. I think it was actually, might have even been last week or the week before. I had a couple of girls/ladies. I always get torn when people are kind of in that maybe late 20s, 30s sort of thing. Probably not girls, ladies, I don't know. Anyway, so a couple of fantastic powerhouse women, and Bianca and Kritz from the Big Sister experience, and they basically are doing a whole bunch of stuff in schools, particularly with girls. They do a little bit of stuff with parents as well, and sometimes with teachers, but it's mostly a lot of stuff, and it is, I think, shifting some of that group kind of thinking, and definitely bringing a lot more awareness to the psychological side of things, and how to talk through different issues. And, it's a complicated landscape. I mean, one of the blessings I think of being a parent is you get to see how your own kids deal with situations, and it's almost like a little, sometimes like sometimes too much like a mirror, but you can kind of see within them, like my little guy, he's 4, and I think he's struggling a bit, with his anger, and sometimes he'll just get himself into a bit of a rage, and we are always like, you're just going to make things worse for yourself. And you can almost see the gears turning, where he's at a point where I think he kind of feels like, I've already made a big scene here, and now mum and dad are upset and angry with me, and so like I just don't, it's like, he doesn't know how to get out of this little cycle he's in, because he's thinking about like that he's kind of embarrassed himself. He's a bit ashamed, but he's still trying to think, maybe there's a way I can just brute force my way through this thing, and still having a last crack at it. So, but, I mean, and my daughter was the same. He's probably got a bit more, I think, and my nephew has a bit of a rage sort of situation happening. So it's not uncommon, but. And I think what we touched on last time is, unfortunately for some people, they grow up in environments that teach them all the wrong things, like people feeding them with terrible information. And so that creates further, confliction, because you're having these sort of emotions, but maybe being told not to feel them, or that you're less of
Yeah.
a person for feeling, like exactly what you're saying, like the whole, suck it up, princess, or boys don't cry, or like
Yep.
I hope that to a large degree some of this stuff is gone. But yeah, certainly in my era, people would. It was very common to hear people saying, "Oh, you girl," or "you sissy," or using
Yep.
the female sort of stuff as a derogatory kind of term,
Yep.
which I think we're working hard to push against. But oh yeah, it's funny because I still say, I'll be honest with all that. Like I still find myself sometimes like saying to him, "Mate, you're being like a baby," like and it's just what. I don't know if it's because of it's how what happened to how I was spoken to, but it just
Yep.
comes out.
It, it, it does. Look,
Yeah,
one of the techniques we certainly I used to use with being a police officer when people are in an angry state, and even kids are the same, is to ask them questions. And when you're asking them questions, again, it forces them to think about the answer. So,
yeah,
you know, but the question's kind of got to be like a higher level question, not saying, "Oh, why you're being a tool." That doesn't really help because it's. But you kind of wanting them to have to use the blue brain again and force
yeah,
that blood to pump up and reverse the gears. So, as you get better at it, and some people are naturally good at it, they know how to calm people down. They ask them lots of questions. They're talking to them. It's a technique I use when I ran some sessions not that long ago with some of our managers on one of the farms, on some of the farms we used to have. I worked for a big cattle manufacturer, and anyway, you know, I teach them these techniques about, and it was more for them to actually work because they were very rural and they very isolated with their team. So there's a lot of that stuff, but it was more about kind of like a mental health first aid kind of initiative. But one guy in particular, a few weeks after I ran the session, was said he'd gone into town, he'd run into this other guy, someone he didn't actually know, but this guy was going to commit suicide, and he was a young guy, and he was a young guy himself, and he just remembered me talking to him about asking high level questions. So he was asking him all these questions, and he said, "Oh, man, I was asking him just stupid, not stupid questions, but questions that he was he." So what it does is when you're thinking, what questions can I ask this person? It also means that you don't go into a fight or flight thing as well. So it does two things. It makes you think with your blue brain, so you're not getting, because one of the big issues with some of the mental health things is, and this is where AOK Day probably need to do a little bit more, can maybe think about doing a bit more, because it's a great initiative, is about what happens if somebody says, yes, no, actually, no, I'm not okay. So now
mm,
you go, oh, crap, I'm your friend. What
yeah,
do I do? And
yeah,
I don't want to stuff it up. I don't want you to now go and kill yourself or do
yeah,
something bad to yourself. And I'm the cause, or I think I'm the cause, and you put some
yeah,
blame on it for yourself.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
that's also could take you into a worry and then you go, oh, you know what, I'm just not going to get involved in this, and then the guy
mm,
still does something. So
mm,
with this particular thing, it's about helping them stay calm but also asking the questions, and then hopefully that person can at least buy some time, talk them through it, get them thinking with the blue brain and go, okay, look, is this going to affect who's at home? How's it going to affect them? Can you think of you've got a daughter. How do you think she'll think about this? So this is where you're creating time, but you're also actually reversing the gears. So they're thinking about those consequences. They're thinking about these things, and it's about, again, it's a technique. It's not always going to work, but essentially it gives you some tools to think about. And when you do it enough times, or practice with people and having conversations, it's a really important thing. And one of you touched on it before about parents and doing good stuff and not wanting to use the wrong language with stuff.
yeah,
That one of the key pieces when I'm doing stuff on suicide prevention, especially with kids, is to have the parents there, is to understand that your language has an effect, but at the same time, look, we're human. We'll stuff it up because we are, like you say, that's how I was taught.
mm,
I get angry about that, and I'll say something that I maybe regret and go, oh, probably could have said that better. But essentially, creating the safety for your child is your responsibility, in my view, that you have a conversation with them and say, no matter what happens, okay,
yeah,
dad gets a bit hot headed when you stuff things up. That's okay. But no matter what happens, if you're feeling bad about something or you've done something that's wrong, talk to me. We don't want to get into into a situation where, the kids here in Brisbane recently committed suicide. The parents had no idea. The kid was playing basketball the day before, went on his bike, no signs. So it's hard to pick up signs, but it's about making sure that you have the conversation on a regular basis. So, hey, you can do anything. I'm still your dad. I'm still your mum. We can work things out. Ultimately, talk to us. Because if you don't talk to us and we don't know, we can't help with any of that stuff. And especially, I think those conversations need to be instilled. So the kid might go, "Oh, Dad did call me a wuss last week, but you know what? He did also say, anything you can come and talk to me about. I didn't like being called a wuss. I don't feel good about it in my belly, but at the same time, he created that. You created that safety enough for that person to go, I'll still talk to him.
Yeah.
So that's a key part in terms of, well, certainly from a suicide prevention. If more people go and actually have the conversation and we take it seriously, we can get to a better solution most of the time.
Yeah, definitely. Mate, thanks so much for coming on. It's been really great talking to you.
Thank
I
you.
enjoyed it just as much as the first time, and let's hope that that the audio has come through. It seems to have sounded okay most of the time. Just both to help people and also of course, because it's good for you as well. Like, how can people get their hands on the book Lighting the Blue Flame?
Yes, actually, I didn't even bring one with me. It's pretty silly. I'm not very good at marketing, am I? Look, you can just hop on, Google it. Amazon have it, Goodreads have it. I haven't seen too many in the Aussie stores because it does come from the UK. There's obviously issues with getting stuff from the UK at the moment with COVID. But yeah, look, most people can get it on. There's a picture. Thanks, mate. You gave me a better plug than I could. So yeah, if you just Google it, you can get a copy through the Amazons and a few of the other places, depending on where you are in the world. So yeah, it's not too hard to find.
Yeah, Lighting the Blue
Thank
Flame.
You
No, I really like it. Makes a lot of. No, you're welcome. I was, if I was more prepared, I would have had a special screen there with a little book going.
That's
but
better than
we'll
what
try.
I had.
I'll try and do some. I'll do some show notes and stuff like that, and put some
Awesome.
put some links in there so that people can get
Appreciate
hold of it. I think it's really great, just practical knowledge, and it makes sense. And let's I get inspired when I kind of have this sort of conversation. I know that there are people like you out there having these conversations and working with people, because the more that everybody becomes aware of it and aware of our own sort of emotions and trying to, it's just like every single thing, right? It's all incremental. So many people, unfortunately, I think, look at the state of the world and whether it's the state of the climate or they look at the state of, how people are behaving and treating each other, and they just kind of think, there's nothing I can do, But the way the world's gotten to where it is has been little teeny bits, and when you've got 8 billion people, 8 billion little teeny bits actually adds up to a significant amount. So if we can all tweak our psychology a little bit, both recognizing our own behavior and maybe being less critical of somebody else. You see them in red lane, and so rather than just going, oh, not this bloody, thing again. It would help. And then alcohol. I mean, it's I don't see that going anywhere, and I like a drink myself, so but it is a trigger. I know it's alcohol's like one of those things where if it's good times and everyone's like I love I love weddings, because weddings generally it's a happy time. There's lots of people. There are interesting people. There's people that you really care about. It's overarchingly like a festive and really heartwarming event. So that's great. Have a few drinks, and next thing you're in a conga line, or all sorts of things can happen. But but like we've all had those times where just everything went pear shaped, and you went camping with your mates, or you went and stayed somewhere, and next thing someone stormed off with their esky over there, and someone else just got off wandering off into the darkness over here, and you're just like, oh goodness. Someone's lost an eyebrow, yeah. Oh, wow. I didn't speak, just funnily enough, going camping this last weekend, after having a few drinks and sort of sitting around the fire, and it was kind of nice because my older daughter, she's 9, so she was old enough to sort of step. She really wanted to do some scary stories, and I may have taken it too far because I told her I tried to really set the scene of when I remember hearing this scary story as a kid, and anyway, that's a side note, but that was funny. Sort of, except for my wife was like, "Don't." She was my wife's like, "Don't do that again." Like, what did you do that for? And I was like, "She told me she wanted a scary story." But anyway, we all went wandering to go to the bathroom off into the property. It was so disorientating trying to get back to the bloody campsite because you've got all these different tents and caravans and fires going and people laughing, and I got completely disorientated, and I even got the compass out because I knew that that we were like on this property and there was a river where we were kind of close along the river side. So I thought, worst case scenario, if I just head west, I'm going to hit the river and I should be able to figure out where I am from there and then find my way along the tents and get back, which I did. But it was just, anyway, just a little funny story.
Wow, good, mate. Well, good.
Yeah, thanks for chatting. Hey, stay in touch. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
People look up the book, and we'll I'm sure talk again sometime
Awesome.
down the line. Cheers,
Thank
mate.
you,
Thanks.
Have a good.
Oh, we don't want that screen. That's a little bit better. Oh, all right. Thanks so much for coming, everybody. If you like this and if you are not subscribed, then please hit the subscribe button. Click the notification bell if you're on YouTube, because otherwise we just get lost in the fray. And I'll look forward to talking to you next time. And there are other episodes of Changemakers that you can check out. And I also have more that I originally recorded on Instagram, not as good quality, just straight out of the phone, but great conversations that I will upload, and I will stream them through here. So whether you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube, you will be able to find them there. Thanks very much. Take care. Let's all try and stay in blue brain and do what we can to care for people when they're in the red brain. Ask them questions.